The alien girl stood at the edge of the ruined stone circle, her silver eyes fixed on the intruder. The human was covered in dust and sweat, his hands raised, a shovel still clutched in his grip. He had wandered too far, digging where he did not belong. She stepped forward, blade flashing in her hand, and pressed it close to his throat. "You dare set foot on sacred ground?" she hissed. Her voice carried both fury and pride. She was immortal, one of the highborn, and he was nothing but a short-lived creature. The human did not flinch. He looked at her with calm, steady eyes, even though his pulse beat fast in his neck. "I didn't know," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I was only digging for shelter. I didn't mean to trespass." His calm unsettled her. Most mortals begged or cried when faced with death. This one stood firm, though he knew she could end him with a single strike. She pressed the blade harder. "You should fear me, human. My people live forever. You will rot in less than 100 years." "Then let me live those years," he answered quietly, "instead of ending them here." Before she could reply, the ground shook. From the trees, armored raiders burst forth, scavengers that even immortals despised. They carried spears tipped with burning plasma, their laughter harsh and cruel. The girl's grip tightened on her blade, ready to fight, but there were too many. The human glanced at her, then at the raiders. Without a word, he stepped in front of her, shovel raised like a weapon. It was foolish. He was weak compared to them. Yet he did not hesitate. He placed himself between her and danger, though he owed her nothing. The first raider lunged, spear striking forward. The human caught it with the shaft of his shovel, sparks bursting as metal clashed with plasma. His arms shook with the force, but he held firm. Another raider swung low, and the human twisted, taking the blow across his shoulder. Blood spilled, but he did not fall. The girl leapt forward, her blade slicing through a raider's throat, but her eyes kept sliding back to the human. He was reckless, fighting bare hands and desperate strength. He should have died in the first strike, but he refused to fall. His eyes burned with a fire she had never seen in immortals, a fire that came from knowing death was always near. She spun, cutting down another raider, then shouted at him, "Fool, you will be killed." "Maybe," he grunted, slamming the edge of his shovel into an enemy's face, "but not while you're behind me." Her breath caught. Why would he protect her? She was immortal. She did not need saving. And yet, here he was, bleeding, straining, standing in front of her as though her life mattered more than his. The raiders regrouped, circling them. One hurled a spear straight at her chest. She froze, the angle too sharp to block in time. Then the human moved. He threw himself into the path, the spear piercing his arm instead of her heart. He roared in pain but stayed on his feet, wrenching the weapon free and swinging it back at the enemy. Her blade danced, fury burning in her chest. Side by side they fought, immortal and mortal, perfect skill and desperate courage. The raiders fell one by one until the last turned and fled into the trees. Silence returned to the ruined circle, broken only by the human's ragged breathing. Blood ran down his arm, dripping onto the stones. He leaned on his shovel, swaying but still standing. "Are you hurt?" he asked her, voice weak. She stared at him, stunned. No one had ever asked her that before. Not another immortal, not even her kin. "You protected me," she said, almost in disbelief. He gave a faint smile. "Didn't seem right to watch you fall." She lowered her blade slowly. For the first time in her endless life, she did not know what to say. He was broken and bleeding, yet he looked at her as though her life was worth more than his. It made no sense. Immortals had always told her humans were weak, selfish, fleeting things. But this one had stood against death with nothing but his bare strength and stubborn will. Her silver eyes softened for a moment before she caught herself, pulling her pride back like a shield. "You are still beneath me, human," she said coldly, though her voice trembled. "Do not think this changes anything." He only nodded, blood running down his hand. Didn't expect it to. Then his knees buckled and he collapsed onto the stones. She stood frozen, torn between disgust and something else she had no word for. The human had risked his short life for her, an immortal he had every reason to fear. As she watched him lying there, pale and weak, she felt a strange ache in her chest. For the first time, she wondered if immortality was truly strength, or if the courage of a dying man was something greater. The human lay in the healer's chamber, his arm wrapped in glowing bandages that pulsed faint light into his wound. He stirred now and then, but his stubborn spirit had carried him through the blood loss. The alien girl stood in the corner, arms crossed, trying to look unaffected, though her silver eyes never left him. She told herself she was only watching to make sure he did not cause more trouble. Yet, deep inside, she knew the truth. She wanted to see if he would wake. When he finally opened his eyes, he tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his body. She moved forward quickly, pressing him back down with surprising gentleness. "Stay still, human. Your flesh is weak enough already," he gave a faint smile. "Still alive, though. Guess that counts for something." Her jaw tightened. His calm words stirred something inside her again. She should hate him. He was temporary, fragile, and nothing like the eternal race she belonged to. But the memory of him stepping in front of the spear would not leave her mind. No immortal would have done such a thing. Days passed, and he was kept in the city as both guest and prisoner. She was assigned to watch him, though she pretended it was punishment for him, not for her. Yet as she walked with him through the crystalline halls, she noticed strange things. He fixed broken tools left in the market with scraps of metal. He showed children how to tie knots stronger than the silk their people wove. He treated a villager's burned hand with nothing more than cool water and patience when the healers had turned away, saying it was not worth their time. She found herself asking questions she never meant to. Why do you waste your energy on things that do not matter? Because they matter to someone, he answered simply, adjusting the broken hinge of a stall door until it worked again. And that's enough for me. His words lingered. Immortals had eternity, yet most cared little for small lives around them. Humans, short-lived as they were, seemed to pour all their fire into every passing moment. She tried to dismiss it, but she caught herself staring at him when he wasn't looking. One night, unable to sleep, she walked into the courtyard where he sat repairing a torn piece of his clothing by the dim glow of a lamp. She stayed in the shadows, watching. His hands were rough, scarred but patient. He hummed softly, a sound strange to her ears, filled with both sadness and strength. "Why do you not break?" she whispered under her breath, though she did not think he could hear. But he raised his head, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. "Maybe I already did," he said softly, surprising her. "But I learned something. You can still keep moving, even when you're broken." For a long moment, neither spoke. The night air hung heavy between them, charged with something she did not want to name. She turned away quickly, hiding her face from his gaze, but her heart beat faster than it ever had in centuries of her immortal life. The temple bells echoed through the city, deep and slow, a sound that always made her chest heavy. She stood before the great stone wall covered with runes, reading the words she had memorized long ago. "Immortals shall not bear life. To create is to surrender eternity." She had heard the law since she was a child, but tonight the words struck differently. Her hand brushed across her stomach, and for the first time in her endless years, she wondered what it would feel like to hold a child. Her child. The thought burned inside her like a forbidden flame. She knew the cost. If she chose that path, her body would wither, her eternal youth fading away. No one had dared such a thing for thousands of years. And yet, when she closed her eyes, she saw him, the human who stood bleeding before her, who smiled even when he should have feared death. She found him in the courtyard, sharpening the edge of his shovel as though it were a blade. He looked up when she came near, his eyes calm as always. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. Her throat tightened. She wanted to shout at him, to drive him away before her thoughts turned even darker. Instead, she snapped. "You are a fool. You risk yourself for no reason. You think small and you live small. Do you know how short your life will be compared to mine?" He didn't flinch. "Then maybe that's why every moment matters more to me." Her hands curled into fists. She wanted to hate him, wanted to crush the strange warmth spreading through her chest, but the words burst out before she could stop them. "You make me feel weak. You make me feel alive. Do you understand what that means for someone like me?" The silence between them grew sharp. His eyes held hers, and she hated that he did not look away. "Then why do you stay near me if it hurts you so much?" he asked. Her voice cracked. "Because you make me feel mortal, and I cannot stop wanting that." The words hung in the night like a secret too heavy to take back. She turned away quickly, as if ashamed, her silver eyes burning with something fiercer than anger. He said nothing more, only watching her as if trying to see beyond the mask of pride she wore. In that moment, she knew the line she stood upon between eternity and something far more dangerous was growing thinner every day. The temple fires burned low as the elders gathered around her, their faces pale with the glow of eternal flame. They spoke with voices that had carried through centuries, voices heavy with command. You have wandered too far, child. Do not let a mortal cloud your judgment. You are immortal. You are meant to rule, not to fall. Their words pressed against her chest, reminding her of everything she stood to lose. Eternal youth, endless strength, the right to walk the stars forever. Yet none of it felt as sharp or as real as the memory of a human standing in front of her, bleeding so she would not. They told her of the price again, of how once she chose, there would be no return. A mortal life, aging, death. They tempted her with visions of glory, of empires that would kneel at her feet. She listened, but her heart pounded with another sound, the echo of his rough voice, the stubborn way he stood, the strange warmth that her people had never given her. While they warned her, he was fighting alone. Shadows moved through the lower streets. Assassins dressed in black steel, their orders whispered, "Kill the human before he poisons her further." He was unarmed, except for his broken shovel, but he faced them anyway. He swung and blocked, but their blades cut deep. His blood painted the stones as he tried to crawl back to his feet. She felt it, as though some bond had already been forged. Her chest ached, her steps quickened, and before she realized she was running through the night, she reached him in the circle of blades, his body already failing, his hand still clutching the useless weapon. He looked up at her with fading strength, as if surprised she had come. Without thought, she stepped in front of him, her own blade drawn. For the first time in her endless life, fear gripped her, not for herself, but for him. The assassin sneered, calling her traitor, warning her that if she protected him, she would lose everything. She raised her blade anyway, her voice shaking but firm. "I will not let him die before me." Her strike was quick and merciless, fueled not by immortal pride, but by something stronger. Rage, desperation, and a choice her kind had always forbidden. Blood sprayed across the stones, and the assassins fell one by one. When it was over, she dropped to her knees beside him, pressing her hands against his wounds. His breathing was shallow, but still there. For the first time, she realized her eternity meant nothing if he was not part of it. And in that moment, the thought of giving it up no longer frightened her. It felt like the only path left. The ritual chamber was hidden beneath the temple, its walls carved with ancient markings that glowed faintly in the dark. She led him there with trembling hands, his steps uneven, blood still seeping from the wounds that refused to close. He did not question her, only followed, his eyes steady even as pain shadowed his face. He should have been resting, but he stood because she asked him to. That loyalty cut deeper than any blade. The air was heavy with power, thick enough to make his skin crawl. She placed her palm on the center stone, and the runes came alive with fire. The elders' voices whispered in her mind, telling her to stop, to remember who she was, but her heart pounded louder. For centuries, she had walked the world untouched by time. Now she would choose to let time claim her, all for the chance to hold a life in her arms that no immortal had ever known. He reached for her arm, his voice rough. "You don't have to do this." Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time they were filled with fear, not for herself, but for what she might lose if she hesitated. "I do, because eternity means nothing without you." She pressed her hand harder, and light burst from the floor, wrapping around her body like fire. She cried out as strength was ripped away, her limbs trembling, her immortal blood burning into weakness. Her skin flushed with warmth she had never felt before, a mortal heat replacing the cold perfection of eternity. She collapsed forward, and he caught her in his arms, her body smaller, softer, fragile in a way she had never imagined. Her lips trembled as she whispered against his chest, "It is done. I am no longer eternal." He held her as if she were glass that might shatter. Why? Why throw it all away? Her hand clutched weakly at his shirt, her breath shallow but steady. "Because I once hated you, and now I cannot imagine a life without you. I wanted a future, even if it means an end." The temple shook, with anger above them as her people cried out in fury. their voices echoing like thunder. They had felt the breaking of her bond with eternity. To them, she was no longer one of the highborn. She was a traitor, a fallen one, and they would hunt her until her last breath. She closed her eyes, resting against him, and whispered through the pain, "Then let them come. I would rather face death beside you than live forever without you." The forest stretched endlessly, its branches clawing at the night sky as they moved through the shadows. He carried her when her legs failed, though she tried to protest, her pride clashing with her new weakness. Each step reminded her of what she had lost: the effortless strength, the tireless energy, the eternal shield of her people. Now her body ached, her breaths came shallow, and she felt the slow weight of time pressing on her shoulders. Yet when she looked at him, steady and determined, she felt no regret. They slept beneath broken ruins, wrapped in scraps of cloth and stolen furs. The sound of her people's hunting horns often echoed in the distance, closer each night. He kept watch, eyes sharp, shovel and stolen blade by his side, as though he could stand against an army alone. She wanted to tell him how foolish it was, but instead she found herself comforted by the fire in his eyes. For all his fragility, he never once thought of abandoning her. One evening, the chase slowed. They found a quiet cave where dripping water echoed like soft music. He tended her wounds, his rough hands surprisingly gentle, while she studied his face. The lines of exhaustion were etched deep, yet he never complained. She reached for his hand, hesitating before pressing it to her stomach. His eyes widened. "What is it?" she swallowed, her voice trembling. "I feel it. A spark. Something new. Something growing." For a moment, silence filled the cave. He stared at her, disbelief flickering across his face, then slowly softening into something stronger than joy. His fingers tightened over hers. "You mean?" Her lips curved into the faintest smile, though tears shimmered in her eyes. "It worked. I carry our child." He let out a shaky laugh, pressing his forehead against hers, unable to find words. She closed her eyes, savoring the warmth between them. For the first time, she did not think of eternity or the power she had abandoned. She thought only of the fragile life stirring inside her and the man who had risked everything to stand beside her. Beyond the cave, torches glimmered in the darkness. Her people had not stopped hunting, but now, even with fear closing in, she held him tighter, whispering, "No matter what happens, this child will be proof that we chose something greater than forever." The night was alive with fire as the hunters closed in, their blades flashing, their voices shouting her name as though it were a curse. He stood in front of her once more, just as he had in the ruins, his body tense and his grip unyielding on the worn handle of his weapon. She rose beside him, her strength no longer eternal, her limbs heavy, but her resolve sharper than it had ever been. She was no longer immortal, yet for the first time she felt unstoppable. The clash came fast and merciless. Steel met steel, sparks bursting in the darkness. He fought like a man with nothing left to lose, each strike fueled by the will to protect more than himself. She moved at his side, her blade cutting swift arcs, her body weaker than before, but her spirit blazing. They fought not as immortal and mortal, but as equals. Two souls bound by something her people could never understand. Blood painted the earth, cries echoed through the trees, and when the dust cleared, only silence remained. The last of the hunters fled into the night, leaving the two of them standing, battered but unbroken. She leaned against him, her chest rising and falling with mortal exhaustion, but her eyes shone with fierce pride. Years passed. Their battles became stories whispered across both lands, but the truth lived quietly in a small home at the edge of forgotten hills. She aged slowly now, strands of silver hair streaking what had once been eternal youth. He grew older, his scars deep, his body worn, but his smile never lost its strength. And in her arms their child laughed, a boy with eyes that glowed faintly, carrying the light of both worlds. One evening, as the sun dipped low, she held her son close and whispered words he was too young to understand. "I was once eternal, untouched by time, but your father showed me something greater. He showed me how precious a single heartbeat can be." She looked at the man who had once been her enemy, now her everything, and smiled through tears. The child turned his gaze toward the horizon, his pupils shimmering with a strange radiance, half human, half immortal. There was something in those eyes, something new, something that belonged to no race before him. She felt a shiver of wonder as she realized their choice had not ended a legacy. It had begun one, and as the stars rose overhead, she no longer longed for eternity. She had already found it, living in the fragile, fleeting moments that her people had always dismissed. Moments carved in love, sacrifice, and the laughter of a child who would carry both their worlds forward.